So let's get started on our journey to understand what inflation is, why it's often not what it seems to be, and why our explanations of inflation are limited at best. Let's start with how we would know that we are in the midst of an inflation as opposed to a situation where some particularly noticeable prices, rents, fuels, houses, are going up without affecting everything else. To understand that, we first need to define what inflation is. Inflation is a general and sustained rise in the level of prices on average. But let's dig into what that actually means. You might think that we have inflation when prices are too high. But that begs the question, high in relation to what? Prices are very high in Switzerland, for example, which is a country with very low inflation, 1.4% in June 2024. To use a common example, in Switzerland, a Big Mac costs around $6. In Turkey, where inflation hit over 75% in May 2024, Big Macs are still much cheaper and cost around $2.60. So which one is expensive? The key thing to understand here is that inflation is not really about how relatively costly things are, but about how their prices are changing. We talk about inflation whenever prices are going up, and about deflation when prices are going down. If yearly inflation is 10%, that means if you paid $1 for a coffee last year, this year you'll likely pay $1.10. By focusing on changes, inflation gives us a picture of our purchasing power, which in the case of this cup of coffee just fell by 10%. Similarly, you probably guessed that Big Macs in Switzerland cost more because people get paid higher wages there than in Turkey. But if we suppose that wages remain constant and both countries experience, say, 100% inflation, then Swiss and Turkish consumers will face a similar increase in the price of their McDonald's, even if it costs $12 for the Swiss and $5 for the Turks. Which one hurts more is quite a different question. In short, what really matters when we talk about inflation is how much, how quickly, and how broadly prices are changing. How much focuses upon the magnitude of the change. We may not even notice if prices increase by 1 to 2% from one year to the other, but we'll definitely worry if prices double in a year. We care about how quickly inflation increases relative to our wages. In theory, at least, if the price of fuel doubles but our wages also double, we would not be quite as alarmed, as this would be, as economists put it, a nominal rather than a real change. The numbers moved, but the relationship between wages and prices did not. Yet, as we shall discuss shortly, people often confuse nominal and real changes, which makes inflation's real effects different from our subjective perception of them.